Gather round, one and all, and listen to tales of excitement and adventure. Tales of daring heroes, savage monsters, and bards who just couldn't keep it in their pants. Tales of friendship, nobility, drunken foolishness, and unforgettable fun. These are tales of role-playing games, fair listeners, and this is Rollin' Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard. I'm sorry, let's try that again. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Danishes and Dragons, that morning show that I also do, not Rollin' Bones. All right, here we are. So, today we are going to be talking about two things that are very, very near and dear to my heart, that being Irish breakfast and Cromwell McGwen. For anyone who is watching this, tuning in, and does not know, maybe this is your first time experiencing Danishes and Dragons, or Rollin' Bones, or any of my content before, Cromwell McGwen was my first ever player character. He is also my forever NPC, and he has managed to make his way into every single game that I've GM'd. There is in fact a broad, vast universe of infinite Cromwells all out there somewhere. At least in the, yes, this is a stream of no consequence. Welcome, Austin. How you doing? And I'll explain that little joke here in just a little bit, because that actually ended up being kind of a formative part of Cromwell's backstory that morphed into a pretty good table joke. So, in the spirit of talking about Cromwell McGwen, as you noticed there, the last name is an Irish last name, so I have made, and I'll show you the remnants here, some corned beef hash. This is one of my favorite Irish dishes of all time. It is delicious. I love it, and it's dirt simple to make. Turned out pretty good this morning. It's really, it comes down to like 3 or 4 ingredients. The hardest part is the corned beef, and if you have an Instant Pot, the Instant Pot makes it very easy. If you have an Instant Pot, then corned beef is no big mountain to climb. Basically, you stick it in there. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it had been a while since I'd had corned beef too, Austin, and that's why I decided, if we're talking about Cromwell's very Celtic inspired, so we're gonna throw on some corned beef and make myself corned beef hash. But basically the way that you do corned beef in the Instant Pot, you stick it in with 4 cups of water. You use the seasoning pack that comes with the corned beef that you can get at the supermarket. Or if you're going just super old school, you can look up different recipes for the pickling spices that you need. Stick it in there with 4 cloves of garlic and an onion, like chopped into slices. And you pressure cook it on high for 70 minutes. Usually I let it slow release because it doesn't sound like my apartment's going to explode when I slow release, but this morning I was in a hurry, so I just opened that valve there. And then after it's done, you pull it out, you chop it up, and then I made it this morning without putting the corned beef in the skillet with the potatoes and the onions. I kind of woke up with the assumption that my wife would want to eat some of my corned beef hash that I made, and I ended up making enough for both of us. But she went with the second best Irish breakfast, that being Lucky Charms. So I have a lot of corned beef hash left over, but typically what you do is you cook the corned beef with the potatoes and the onions. What I did this morning, and I'm probably going to stop doing this because it never really turns out quite the way I wanted it to. I put the scrambled egg in with the potatoes and the onions right at the very end. A lot of times the egg just kind of gets buried in with the potatoes when that happens. It doesn't really stand on its own like the egg is supposed to. So next time I cook it, if it's just for myself, since, I am obviously not a vegetarian and I don't mind those things being cooked together, I will mix that in. I'll mix the corned beef in with the potatoes and the onions, cook it the way God or the leprechauns intended it, and from there, it should turn out kind of normal. And I was thinking about making myself some Irish coffee. For anyone who has not had Irish coffee, it's more than just putting whiskey in your coffee. That's actually a propaganda, dirty smear merchant lie. There is more to Irish coffee than just whiskey. You take your coffee, you have to mix in Irish whiskey, brown sugar. Now, for the Irish whiskey, I recommend Sexton, Jameson's, or Tullamore Dew. Those are kind of my three Irish whiskeys there. If anyone else has any other Irish whiskeys that they really like, and you're wanting to break a bottle over my head for not mentioning your favorite, drop it in the comment section, and I will happily try your favorite whiskey. That goes for all content that I put out on this channel. I mean, you could put Irish butter in your coffee, Austin. At that point, you've got a bulletproof coffee. I did use Irish butter to butter the skillet, though. I did go fully Irish, except I think my potatoes might have come from Idaho. I don't know. They were just the Kroger russet potatoes, so... Also, the recipe that I was using recommends Yukon Gold. I like russet better, so russet. That's my recommendation, at least. But yeah, you put in the Irish whiskey and brown sugar, and it's best if you use a glass mug. Now, I don't have any glass mugs. I could use like a regular pint glass, but that's a lot of coffee. Says the man who just drank this. That's a lot of coffee all at once. Although, I think about it, I've got some large mugs that are probably well over 12 ounces that the pint glass is. So, yeah, I probably drank more than 12 ounces of coffee in a single session all the time, and I'm just not thinking about it right, because I don't do math very well. Unless it's modifiers for Dungeons & Dragons or any other role-playing game. My parents and I were actually joking about that recently. Because growing up, doing math was always like the most difficult thing in the world for me. I hated math class. I hated doing the math flashcards and you've got the test that's just like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all that, all the way up through like 5th grade. Yeah, no, I was not about that. Then algebra comes in and my head's exploding. And with stuff like that, it really kind of starts at kindergarten. My kindergarten teacher was the devil incarnate, so I never really got off on a good start there, but, I looked at my parents, or I was on the phone with them, I didn't look at them. I said to my parents, I was like, I do math in my head all the time now. You'd actually be really surprised at how often I'm doing math in my head, and it's because I'm adding modifiers in Dungeons and Dragons. And my mom said, well, if we knew at the time, that's what it would take. And what's funny about that is when I first started playing, I was in college. I'd expressed interest in playing D&D once in high school, but only once. Because when I used the words Dungeons and Dragons in that combination, my mom immediately freaked out, having flashbacks to the Mazes and Monsters satanic panic of the 80s. And mom was never hysterical about anything like that. I don't know where it came from. The one thing she would always tell me was that anime was evil. I think she just did that because anime annoyed her. There were a lot of things we weren't allowed to watch in our house because they annoyed Mom. SpongeBob, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Power Rangers, and, Pokemon was up there. So I think it was just a way to give me a reason other than it irritates me. Because I did things that irritated my mom all the time. Anyway, so just saying it irritates me is not that much of a deterrent to a young Ryan. I'd also, if it irritated Mom, I'd just watch it in the other room like I did with Power Rangers. Yeah, Austin, I think we had similar first sessions when I first went. Because I told my parents, I was 19 at the time, so there wasn't anything they could do to me. But I said, hey, I'm going to take this Sunday afternoon, I'm going to go to these complete strangers' house in Charlotte, and I am going to play Dungeons and Dragons with them. And my parents were like, okay, where'd you meet these people? The internet! Okay, don't die. And then I show up at my first session and immediately a dog bites me. In real life. I'm driving, for anyone who can't see the comment section, I'm driving 40 minutes to a game shop to meet up with strangers to play Dungeons and Dragons from the internet, and I'm taking Lucas. Bye. Yeah. And Lucas, I wish Lucas would come on the show. I've invited him on a couple times. I wish he would even just jump in chat. But yeah, I imagine your parents probably had the same reaction to my parents. It's like, okay, we're about to lose a kid. In Lucas's case, we're about to lose a person who eats all of our food. Because that was something that happened very early on when we were kind of getting the group together. For the longest time, it was just me, Muhammad, and David, who have all been on the show. And then Ashley came in a couple times, and then she started coming regularly. Then we moved where we were playing to my old local comic and game store, Parker Banner, Kent and Wayne in Cornelius, North Carolina. Shout out to PBKW. If you guys are ever in the Lake Norman area, go see Matt Milburn at PBKW. It's a great shop, great people. I went there from the time I was 13 playing Warhammer 40K all the way to when I was 23 and moved to Nashville. And every time I go back to Charlotte, I go back to PBKW. So, we moved there, and when we moved there, we got a couple new people. And those new people were Austin, Joe, and Lucas. Now, you guys are hearing currently from Austin, and have heard from Joe before as well. But Lucas has not been on the show yet, and there were some interesting things that would happen with Lucas very early on. He was very quiet, very kind of reserved, still kind of feeling us out a little bit. Can't necessarily blame him. We're a bunch of weirdos, me especially. But we would always kind of have food there because, we're all coming from different places. Everyone's hungry. We need to have dinner. So, we'd order pizza or bring snacks or something like that. And Lucas always declined the food. Lucas never would eat in front of us. To the point where we wondered, does Lucas actually eat? The answer to that question is yes, and lots. Yeah, I got Chinese food from Coral Sushi over in Huntersville, and I brought that just because everyone that night we were like, everyone just kind of bring your own dinner, and so I brought over some Chinese food from my favorite Chinese place, and yes, my favorite Chinese place is called Coral Sushi. They have everything. They cover the entire, well, not the entire, but they cover bits and pieces of different Asian cuisine. They've got Thai stuff. They've got, you can get pad Thai, you can get fried rice, you can get Chinese dishes, you can get sushi. It's a great place. We actually went there for the rehearsal dinner for our wedding. And, yeah, it was, I miss that place. Anytime I'm getting Chinese food here, I'm thinking about Coral. Sorry to all of the Chinese places in Nashville. But yeah, we would offer Lucas food and he wouldn't eat, and then eventually he did accept some food. It might have been at one of our holiday parties. And by holiday parties, I don't just mean Christmas. We would kind of do fun stuff pretty much every major holiday. We went to David's parents' lake house for 4th of July. A couple times we hung out at Ashley and Noel's apartment. Just to, might have been from Memorial Day. I don't remember. That might have just been a random summer day. But we'd all get together, cook out, have some good food. And at one point, Lucas did accept some food. He put it on his plate. We turned around and it was gone. And that's when we discovered that not only does Lucas eat, he is quite prolific in that regard. And people might think I'm fat-shaming Lucas. If you've ever seen Lucas, you will know that I don't know where he keeps the food. He's not like a big guy. He's my height and way smaller than me. He's a average built guy. I don't know where he keeps it or what he does with it. But food goes to Lucas and then it disappears. He might just put it in a pocket dimension. I guess he's like Shaggy. And as far as I know, he doesn't smoke weed or anything like that. I've never known him to have the munchies. I don't know. I'm still keeping the possibility that he doesn't eat. He's actually just a warlock with access to a pocket dimension or something like that, and he just kind of shoves the food there, make everyone think he eats. Or he's like Odo from DS9, where he just kind of makes the food appear or the drink appear in front of him, and then it disappears. Although that doesn't necessarily hold water, because I have seen Lucas drunk before multiple times. So either he is very good at acting, or human food actually has an effect on him. Either way, Lucas, you're welcome on the show anytime. Please come on. We'd love to hear from you. So, Cromwell. Oh, I completely forgot about Irish coffee. I went down the Lucas tangent. But yeah, I mean, I've pretty much given you guys the ingredients for Irish coffee. Once you have all the ingredients mixed together, you want to get some like homemade whipped cream. Homemade whipped cream is the best way to do this. The stuff from the can, it's not the same. But you just put that on top and you sprinkle a little bit of brown sugar on top of that and you got yourself an Irish coffee. McCreary's Irish Pub here in the Nashville area, Franklin, Tennessee, to get specific. They do it the best. I've shouted out that place so many times on the show. At some point, they're just going to sponsor me or let me do the show live from there. And yes, a French press. If you have already taken the top off of your French press and downed all the coffee inside it, like I practically should be doing, I suppose, you can use a French press to make whipped cream. We discovered this because my father was doing dishes, and he was washing a French press when I was over at my parents' house visiting. Who has 2 French presses, Elfie? Come on. I have 2 French presses. Don't be ridiculous. I have 2 French presses. Anyway, he was doing dishes, and, you know, he had the dish soap and the water in the bottom, and rather than just, like, I don't know, scrub it like a regular human being, he takes the plunger, sticks it in the soapy water, and just starts plunging it back and forth. And the result was it just kind of, like, foamed up. And it had this creamy consistency to it. I did not eat it, for the record. I did not eat it. But it looked and behaved as he was pouring it out like whipped cream. And I was just like, Dad, you made whipped cream from soap. He's like, yeah, I did. He had no idea what happened. Although he might have. Dad knows a lot about chemistry and stuff like that. If I ever sound ignorant talking about anything scientific or mathematical, it's because I have a philosophy degree. So, Dad knows a lot about that chemistry stuff, so he might have known what would happen. I didn't. But he does it, and I have this flash in my mind. I was like, Elfie. Only I didn't call her Elfie, because if I called her Elfie in front of my parents, we would be made fun of. But anyway, Elfie. We should try to make whipped cream in the French press when I'm not using it for the consumption of coffee. So yeah, you can use a French press to make whipped cream. Instead of whipping it, you can just use the plunger. And yeah, it makes pretty good homemade whipped cream. But you put that on top of your Irish coffee, bada bing, bada boom, you have a delicious beverage. It's also like dessert for breakfast. It can be really, really sweet, really heavy, but it's pretty good. Pretty good. One of these days I will talk about, or I will attempt to replicate McCreary's cold brew, which is cold brew coffee and Guinness and a few other things. So we'll do that. We'll be revisiting this topic several times over the course of the show. But now that we have talked a good amount about Irish breakfast and Irish coffee and bringing the group together, let's have a little bit of a discussion about Cromwell. Yes, a French press can make cold brew. You just put cold water in instead of hot water and leave it in the fridge overnight. Don't push the plunger down until you're done. So you'll need space where the plunger can be up. But it makes good cold brew. The French press can do anything. The French press could cure cancer if they put their minds to it. So, anyway, Cromwell. All the way back in 2015, I was starting to play Dungeons and Dragons. 5th edition was relatively recent at the time. There were only... I think when I started playing, there might have only been the PHB, the Monster Manual, the DMG, maybe a couple adventures, and then Sword Coast Guide came out not too terribly long after I started playing. So there were not a lot of resources for kind of reaching around and making a bunch of different cool multi-class options. You basically had what was in the PHB, and then a little bit of what came with Sword Coast. And subclasses that came with Sword Coast, I think it might have just been the Bladesinger Wizard and the maybe like an early variation of the Arcane Archer that shows up in Xanathars. I don't remember what all initially came with Sword Coast. I do remember it not being enough necessarily for me to want to pick it up. However, I do use specifically cantrips that are introduced in the Sword Coast Guide all the time for any of my magic users, because you guys know me. I like my magic users and my martial characters to be martial in some way. Okay, there we go. Toady Dude in the comments, Austin, Sun Soul Monk, Battle Rager Barbarian, Bladesinger Wizard, and Purple Dragon Knight. And I've actually heard good things about the Purple Dragon Knight. I might give that a go one day. People seem to really like that subclass, so I just may give it a shot. Because a lot of people... I've noticed that not many people volunteer to be the fighter. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess now the Samurai does kind of take the place of the Purple Dragon Knight. Again, Samurai, I should probably give that a try. I'm playing in a martial arts-based campaign right now, so you'd think I'd go Samurai. I didn't because I thought someone else already would. So I went Hexblade, but in the event that Hong Su Chang dies, I will replace him with a Samurai. After what happened in our last session, Hong Su Chang may die. I'm still very happy with the character, but Shag's not messing around. So, anyway. Limited resources, and even with the Sword Coast Guide, there's nothing really there for the kind of character that I was playing, because what I wanted to do was play a Ranger. And the Ranger is in the PHB. However, anyone who is familiar with their 5th edition PHB knows the Ranger is not a bad class, but it's not a good class either. One of the problems with all of the material that WotC has put out since 5th edition started is it routinely puts out subclasses that allow a particular class to be a better Ranger than the Ranger. And that's something that we'll actually be using today. But the Ranger's kind of gotten the short shrift in a lot of ways. There's a lot of different things that probably should have been done with the Ranger that just haven't been done. There's a couple of unearthed arcanas that make the Ranger a little bit better. If you're playing and you're not using the revised Ranger from UA, you're doing it wrong. In fact, halfway through, Arcane Archer is the we're not fixing Ranger statement, as is Scout Rogue, in my opinion. So, what you've got is, there's the revised Ranger from the PHB, or not, from Unearthed Arcana, which halfway through our campaign, when that came out, I switched Cromwell over to a revised ranger. But starting out, I was a raw hunter archetype ranger. And I did not have Xanathar's Guide. Even when it came out, I didn't get it for a while. Just because, I'm a college student. I was a college student at the time. Can't necessarily afford to drop, $39.99 on every new book that comes out. That's changed a little bit these days. I'm still not going to buy every single book that comes out. I have approximately 2 5th edition adventure modules. One is Lost Minds of Phandelver from the starter set, and the other one was given to me for Christmas last year, and it is Ghost of the Saltmarsh. I'm happy to have them. I will run them if I get my hands on them, but as far as buying them for myself goes, unless they add something to the game mechanically, unless they add, a new class or subclass or monster or spells, I don't see the point of them. Or the point of having them unless I'm going to run them. I homebrew most things with my games. So, Cromwell is just a straight-up ranger to start with. Cromwell ended up being really good, although he went through a couple of revisions over the years. Like I said, we went to the Unearthed Arcana Ranger, and then at some point he gave up his magic to defeat one of the big evils that we were facing. He gave up his ability to use magic, and we switched over to a spell-less ranger variant that Muhammad created himself, which ended up being pretty powerful, maybe a little on the broken side, but still, I was not as powerful as some of the more powerful characters in the party. It wasn't like I was dishing out massive amounts of damage that other people weren't doing. I was kind of on par with everyone else at that point. But suffice it to say that the Cromwell that I took from level 1 to level 20 was not necessarily the best version of Cromwell that could have been made. I have more resources on my hands now, so what I'm going to do today is build a multi-classed, revised Cromwell. Just to let you guys know kind of, what I'll be doing here, I'm going to be multi-classing a Battlemaster fighter with a Scout rogue. I'm going to go heavier on fighter, but I'm going to kind of split them up in a way that works with how Cromwell's story progressed. So, in order to do that, I should tell you a little bit more about Cromwell. I've already said that he is the rangeriest ranger to ever ranger. He is Aragorn 1 Kenobi, as I took to calling him in the latter days of playing him. I don't know. I mean, he could have at some point become a paladin of BT's god just for a little bit. Yes, yeah. What Austin is referring to is the one of the major missteps that I did in my growth as a player was openly musing about betraying the drow in front of a Drider that was mind-linked with the drow queen. So, I also turned one of Austin's characters against the party by doing that, because he was playing a paladin, and at that point, things kind of went south, because Cromwell showed that he had a bit of a ruthless side, which is something that kind of came up over the course of Cromwell's career as an adventurer. That was a major arc that he went through before Austin and Lucas and Joe actually showed up. Cromwell was possessed by these 2 weapons. Yeah, that discussion, that was kind of the opposite of the folding boat scenario there. Because instead of us arguing about something that we already had a solution to, mostly out of character. We were arguing in character about something that was very pertinent, but yeah, it that was one of those good moments in Muhammad's campaign where we kind of lost ourselves in our characters. Which, if that happens at the table, even if like feelings are hurt, as long as everyone kind of patches it up at the end and, you know, realizes, okay, we were playing a game and we just got really into it, it's all good. If you lose yourself in your character during a role-playing session, that's fantastic. To me, that's good D&D. In fact, that's the best D&D. If you forget who you are for a little bit, now you're playing with power. So, to give a little bit of background on Cromwell, Cromwell actually has a bit of a kind of shady background. He is the last son of what was basically a world-conquering empire. The Gwyn family started out as a single tribe amongst a loose collection of tribal people, kind of in the Celtic tradition. Only to kind of protect the tribes from other forces kind of popping up around them and organizing. Basically, the idea is that kingdoms are being built around them. Most notably, the elves and the dwarves kind of, you know, building their civilization and, you know, growing more powerful, and then some other human kingdoms also popping up and establishing themselves. And then you've got these coastal tribes who, you know, they've got metal, stuff like that. They're not primitive by any stretch. They're just not organized. So what ends up happening is the very first king, Cromwell the First. My Cromwell is actually Cromwell the Fourth. But Cromwell the First decides he is going to organize these tribes. He'll unite them. The tribes unanimously elect Cromwell and the Gwyn family to kind of lead this coalition of tribes. And they essentially fight a war to seal off this coastal area as theirs. This is the land of Gwyn, or as I've established in other kind of further homebrewed worlds, this is the land of Free Gwyn. And so at this point, Cromwell sets up a castle, Cromwell's Keep, and a city is kind of built around that. So as Cromwell lives, he's generally a pretty fair ruler. But in the tradition of kind of the cycle of emperors that you see specifically in Chinese history, there's this notion within Chinese history of the dynasties start strong and gradually get weaker until the new dynasty comes up. It's a similar situation to the adage that hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. That's basically what ends up happening, although it's a long, gradual deterioration of the morality and the goodness of these emperors. Although they start out as just like local lords, eventually become kings, then by the end they're emperors. So Cromwell's good. His predecessor's not that great, or his predecessor's good but not as good as him. On and on until kind of in the midpoint, Gwyn begins to expand. It expands beyond this coastal country, essentially, and starts to take over the rest of the map. And it pushes and pushes and pushes until we get to kind of the peak of evil within the empire. Cassius McGwen. Cassius McGwen, the eternal emperor of the Gwyn Empire. He is a scumbag. He is pushing all the way to the very edge of the map It's beyond just we're taking over the kingdoms of men. It's we're making alliances with dwarves and elves and then stabbing them in the back as we come through, basically saying, hey, we're dealing with this threat that's kind of also on your land. We're going to come in and help you out with that. And then once that's done, oh, by the way, since we're here, you're all going to, turn over your lands to us. This is what Cromwell was born into. Cromwell is the heir of Cassius. However, Cromwell does not really fall under the influence of his father. Cromwell's father just kind of lets him flap around in the wind a little bit. He's got the whole raised by governesses, raised by tutors kind of thing. And then when he gets to be about 15 years old, Cromwell begins his military training. So the requirement of the Kings of Gwyn is that they have to be warriors as well. That's part of why Cassius is not around to raise his son, because Cassius is off fighting these wars and continuously pushing his empire, and he's insisting that he be there with his men on the front line, which may seem heroic, but he's there essentially just to slaughter as many people as he can and claim glory for himself. And he's an opportunist about it as well. But Cromwell is raised from the time he's 15 to probably about the time where he's 22, 23 years old, and things kind of go south for him. He's raised by his uncle, Abelard. Abelard is the older brother, and he would have been heir to the throne, but the succession process that I came up with was not that the oldest son is automatically the heir. It's if the king has multiple sons, the sons literally have to fight for it. It's this whole ceremony, kind of like, I had not read Dune at the time, but this happens in Dune where, the prince of... Now the Harkonnen prince is fighting in the arena, basically. I did not know about this at the time, but this is kind of what naturally came out of my conception of Gwen. The heirs had to fight it out to see who would be the true king. And it had become tradition for the kind of favored son to lie, cheat, and steal their way to the throne. So Abelard knew that if he was going to fight Cassius in the arena, he was going to die. Regardless of how much he trained, through some means he would be killed. So rather than meet his brother in the arena and die through underhanded means, Abelard opts to abdicate. Essentially, the fight begins in the arena, and Abelard lays his weapons down, lays down his bow, and gets on his knees and bows his head to his brother. Because of this, Abelard is seen throughout the Empire as a tremendous coward. But Cassius knows better. Cassius knows that this is kind of a stroke of tactical genius. So what Cassius does, instead of outright kill his brother, he basically puts him in charge of his special forces. And Abelard kind of becomes essentially a wet work guy, or a spy, more like a Navy SEAL, though, within the Gwen military. And he has this group called the Marauders. So, Cromwell basically shows an aptitude for skirmisher tactics, and he has a good tactical mind. So he becomes a marauder and falls under the direct influence and command of his uncle. His uncle is a good man. His uncle is a good-hearted individual. If he had taken the throne, he probably would have turned things around, and Gwen might not have been as monstrous as it was in its final days. But Abelard, there were other reasons for it. Abelard thought that the throne itself made people evil, which was not very far off from the truth. There's an artifact crown that Muhammad introduced that basically amplified your alignment. And so all of these evil guys had come through and put this crown on, and they'd been made more evil by it. If Abelard had worn the crown, he would have been made more good by it, and things probably would have gone better. In fact, when Cromwell put the crown on, it kind of amplified his morality as well. But Abelard did not know this. He just thought that it's the crown and the throne and the power, and maybe there's some magic in that crown as well, because that there was this legend that this crown did all these great things. There was something corrupting about the throne of Gwen, so he did not want to be near it. So, Cromwell's brought up in the military, and what happens at this time is revolution breaks out. Revolution breaks out in the world. Everyone's sick and tired of the army. It's stretched super thin all across the world. And people just snap, and there's a war. And in the midst of this war, this was actually the first campaign I ran, was set during this time. It was a prequel to Muhammad's campaign that he got to play in. And so those players in that campaign largely kind of led this revolution, even though they were tight with Abelard and they were tight with Cromwell at the time. And basically they ensured that the world changed. And then there was another cataclysm that happened after this, but Gwen was overthrown. And as Gwen is overthrown, Cromwell basically runs. He sees that his father... He sees that his father is evil. His uncle is killed. His uncle is killed by an assassin's arrow. And he thinks, if I try to join up with these revolutionaries, they're not going to believe me. They're probably just going to kill me. I also don't feel super great about turning against my family's legacy. Even though it's an evil legacy, it's still, it's mine. It's what I grew up with. So, and also, he's at this point probably like a level 3 character. So he runs. He is spirited away and he's hiding. But he's a prince. He's a prince to an empire that everyone hates. So what does he do? He basically kind of skulks around, and this is where the conception of him being a ranger kind of came in, is that he... Yeah. One of Austin's characters in that campaign was actually going to be the Yuan-Ti assassin that killed Abelard, but it never really got around to that coming up over the course of conversation. We had discussed that before, but it didn't come around by the time you switched over to... I don't remember who you ended that... the Kenku cleric was who you ended with. By the time you brought that character around, we never really got to that issue. Which is a shame, because that would have been a cool moment. I think Gebetto, especially, Kyle's character, would have had some major issues with Sariel, the Yuan-Ti character. Yes, Felix. Felix of the animated cutlery. Animated objects is stupid. It's powerful, but it's stupid powerful. That spell. If you can get it and you don't take it, you're a fool. That is well worth your spell slot. So Cromwell kind of wanders around the world and becomes a man of the land, because if he goes into town and tries to rent a room and someone recognizes him, the jig is up and he is going to hang or be burned. So he basically just kind of hangs around until there's this other cataclysm that happened that kicked off Muhammad's campaign. Basically, the College of Magic explodes. And there's this kind of like magical nuclear fallout that happens. Society's gone. Except for this city that the dragons have set up over the mountains, which that place was fun. Let me tell you, that was a great kind of hub for the campaign, and a great place where a lot of stuff happened, was that dragon city. For some reason, the name is escaping me, but that was a cool place. But anyway, at this point, the Cromwell's like, okay, there's no organized society anymore. Basically, everything's gone. So I am going to start helping people out. Anyone who needs help, I'm going to join up with this attempt to reorganize society. And I can't remember what that town was called either. But, I'm going to join the guard, and I'm going to do my part to help people out. And that's where the campaign begins. Just plugging my phone in here. That's where everything kind of starts, is, Cromwell is trying to redeem himself. Over the course of the campaign, Cromwell picked up these magical scimitars that they were a sword of vengeance, basically. They took over his mind and made him a lot more ruthless. Once he got through that, it was this whole, I'm trying to restore civilization. And people are beginning to figure out who I am. But the whole thing with Cromwell, as he was trying to hide his identity, anytime someone would talk to him, he would say, "I'm no one of consequence," and that would just kind of, it was the brush off. I'm no one of consequence. Don't worry about me. Because if he said, "I'm Cromwell McGwen," he's dead. So, I'm no one of consequence. Don't concern yourself with who I am. Here's some bread. Here's some gold. I'll kill the guy who kills your husband. I'll hunt down the guy who made passes at your daughter and intimidate him from ever doing something like that again. I'm just a passerby. Don't worry about this. I'll take care of your problem. That kind of stuff. No one of consequence. And so anytime there would be a new character up, coming into the party, or, we'd run into a new NPC, I'd, introduce myself and say, "I'm no one of consequence. You may call me Cromwell." Just give them the first name. You can call me Cromwell. I'm no one of consequence. And so it became a thing. The thing about D&D, though, is built into the rules, as you level up, you're basically more renowned, because something that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to D&D, there aren't that many people with a level in anything just kind of running around the D&D world. Most of even like the healers you encounter might have maybe one level of cleric if they're particularly good at their job. Most people are not leveled characters, though. So once you get to a certain point, you're kind of broadly known, and that point's around like level 10. At level 10, you're basically a local legend. And so at a certain point, I kept doing it, but it kept getting more and more ridiculous. So I'd be like level 17 and run into some new people and say, "I'm no one of consequence." And they'd roll their history check and be like, "No, Bullcrap! I know who you are. And so it just kind of, like, it just evolved into my, kind of my joke that I kept trying to downplay who I was. But in reality, Cromwell had been involved with so many crazy things throughout his entire life that, you know, at some point I just had to drop it. But I never did. So, now that we've gone over kind of the history of Cromwell, let's actually get into the build here. So I'm going to switch over to my screen share. Here we are. Fire. All right, so I could take Cromwell all the way up to level 20. In fact, if we have time, I might do that because this is a martial character. I don't have to pick spells or anything like that. So basically what we're going to do, we're going to start with fighter. So we're going to start fighter. I'll go ahead and put rogue on here too. And I'm initially just going to take him up to about level... We'll start with level 10 and see where we go from there. So what that's going to end up being is roughly fighter 4, rogue. I think I'm actually going to do, yeah, fighter 4, rogue 6. Ryan, his background is a soldier. Human. I'll be doing the variant human, and he is neutral good. And experience points don't matter. So, I'm going to do standard array just for the sake of simplicity. So let's see, for 5E... Again, you're looking at 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. So, basically, the idea here is he's going to be a dex-based Battlemaster fighter. Oh yeah, fighter 6, of course. That's a good point, Austin. I'm not going to be doing it linearly. So, fighter 6, rogue 4. Yeah, I'm not going to be kind of doing all fighter and then switching over to rogue. I'm kind of interspersing it because what's going to end up happening is this is going to go kind of based on how his story plays out. Because as you guys would find him at the beginning of the campaign, yes. Yeah, that's why I'm going with the rogue multiclass, because as a ranger, you don't get... You have to pick between evasion or uncanny dodge. As a rogue, you get both, and you get them way earlier than the ranger does. So, what we'd be looking at here, he's going to be dex-based fighter. We're going to do... For some reason, this is controversial. I always put the modifier in the big box because that's the thing you need to reference more often. I feel like, Austin, I think you and Joe actually had an argument about this not too terribly long ago about what modifier goes in what box. I might be completely mistaken there. But I like to put the actual number in the small box because you reference the modifier more often than you reference the actual number. So that's my justification for that. So yeah, 15 is going in dexterity. That's going to end up being the most important trait here. 14 is going in constitution. One of my big mistakes with Cromwell in my first build was I did not give him much constitution. The 13 is going in wisdom. 12 is going in charisma. 10 is going in intelligence. Strength is going to be an 8. So, the reason I'm doing it that way, I'm not going to wear heavy armor. So my strength modifier doesn't matter. This is a dex-based fighter that I'm building. Yes, the modifier, absolutely. That was in our private Telegram group. The modifier goes in the big box. It just... That's the thing you need to see quickest, so it needs to be biggest. That's my 2 cents. Again, if you want to put the number in the big box, it's okay to be wrong, I suppose. But, you know, modifier in the big box. And if you're using a variant character sheet, it doesn't even matter. So, Cromwell is going to start out with 3 levels of fighter, which is going to get him all the way up to Battlemaster. Let me go ahead and open this up here. He's going to be a variant human. So I get to start with a feat. I'm just looking at my PHP for the fighter section. I've only actually played a fighter once. I had a lot of fun with T-Win, though. I'm definitely going to play a fighter again. Again, because no one volunteers to be the fighter. Everyone wants to be the bard. In all of my games, everyone wants to be the bard. I've tried to be the bard, but someone always beats me to it. And so I've just decided, you know, if I never get to be a bard, I don't care. I will always be the fighter. If no one else wants to be, I'll be the cleric. Because I think clerics are cool, but... You know, I'll be the fighter. I'll be your tank. So, what we're going to start out with here, 3 fighters, and you were about to be the 4th. I don't know if I've looked at the Beast Barbarian or not. Yes, absolutely. That'd actually be pretty hard to, Yes, I've been barred from the Bard, Elfie. I imagine that'd be pretty hard to balance encounters around, though. If you had multiple fighters, that's, I mean, high AC and high damage output at that point. Oh, nice. Nice. You get some animal claws when you rage. I love it. That's great. So, starting out as a fighter, what you get is proficiency with all armor, shields, simple and martial weapons, and your saving throws are strength and con. Since we're going to be going up to 10th level, I'll go ahead and put 4 as the proficiency bonus. And I'll just do the level ups from there. And then as for skills, you get to start with acrobatics, or you choose 2 skills from acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, and survival. So from there, I am going to take, let's see. We're going to take survival. Actually, survival will come later. So we're going to take perception and insight, because he's very much a tactical mind. And then you also get, at first level, a fighting style. My fighting style, so we'll go over here, fighter features. Fighting style is going to be 2-weapon fighting. I'll go ahead and do dashes here just so everything kind of lines up. Go ahead and get second wind, action surge, and then Battle Master features. We'll get to that in just a little bit. So, let's see. Oh, one thing I need to do is my variant human ability score improvements and my feat. So, basically that means 2 of my ability scores get increased by 1. And then I get an additional skill proficiency, and I get 1 feat, is the variant human, for anyone who doesn't already know that. So, naturally, we're going to bump up dexterity to get that extra bonus there. And then I'm actually going to bump wisdom, because if I bump constitution, I only get to bump it 1, and so I won't get another modifier. So I'm going to bump wisdom to go ahead and give it the same modifier as constitution, because wisdom is going to end up being as important to this build as constitution is, since he's going to be kind of a wanderer, a man of the wilderness. And then my feat, I actually think I'm going to take Skulker. But let me see what all we can do. I would take dual wielding, but Cromwell is never going to wield non-light weapons. So let's see what all we could do here. So I could take Skulker, which lets me hide when I'm lightly obscured. When you're hidden from a creature and miss it with a ranged weapon attack, making the attack doesn't reveal your position, and dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom checks relying on sight. So that helps because Cromwell does not have dark vision, being a human. The other feat that I could take that would help for this particular build would be mobile, which increases my speed by 10 feet. Difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement when you take a dash action, and when you make a melee attack against a creature, you don't provoke attacks or opportunity attacks from that creature for the rest of the turn, whether you hit or not. The only thing that's going to keep me from taking mobile is I basically get a similar feature. Yeah, I basically get a similar feature from being a scout rogue. And yes, Austin, Cromwell is using all the high survival stuff. Yeah, he used all of his high survival checks before the campaign started. Unfortunately. For anyone who's not aware of the rule of rangers, whenever you need to track something, that's when your ranger rules the worst. So there's one other possible feat that might do me some good here, as far as this goes. I did get a good amount of utility out of Defensive Duelist. Yep. Rolled a 20 on finding these mushrooms. So, Defensive Duelist, the only thing about that is I'll be getting, like, Defensive Duelist I got a lot of use out of as a ranger. I took that feat later on. But having access to the parry maneuver for the Battlemaster makes that kind of obsolete. And I could do Medium Armor Master, which means that Medium Armor doesn't impose disadvantage on stealth checks. And I can add 3 rather than 2 to my AC if my Dexterity is higher than 16. So with Cromwell being kind of a more of a 2-weapon fighter than a ranged fighter, I'm going to actually give him Medium Armor Master, is going to be the feat that I take. Oh, right, there is the new Slasher feat from, I believe that's a UA. Is that correct? That's an Unearthed Arcana? Let me take a look at that real quick, just because he is dealing slashing damage most of the time. Yeah, so that's a bump to Dexterity. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an attack that deals slashing damage, you can reduce the speed of the target by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. And when you score a critical hit that deals slashing damage to a creature, you grievously wound it, and the target has disadvantage on all attack rolls. That's a good feat. That's actually a really good feat. I might invest in that later, since we've got multiple increases here to work with. So yeah, I will keep that in mind. Feats. So we're going to start with Medium Armor Master. Which means that I can go ahead and start with Half Plate, which will give me a AC of 18. Which is a decent AC for a kind of a skirmisher fighter like this. And of course, what I'm going to give him are... he's going to have scimitars. Actually, we'll get to his magic weapons in a little bit, because Cromwell ended up having magic weapons. So we'll get to those eventually. Now, I do get an additional skill proficiency. With this, I am going to take... I'm trying to avoid, like, nature and stealth and all that, because that'll come with the rogue. Survival as well. So with that, I'm actually going to take... Is there another dex-based thing I could do? Not really a sleight of hand guy. I guess we could take Intimidation. Actually, Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to... No, I don't want to invest that in medicine. You have a cleric for that. I'll put it in acrobatics. Hold the shield in my mouth. I wish. End up being like Zorro from One Piece and hold a sword in my mouth so I can take 3 attacks. Alright, so let's go back to the fighter. I flipped over to the equipment. Here we go. So, at 3rd level, what you end up with here... Combat superiority. Nope, that's the wrong one. Is it Shift Tab? No, that doesn't work. Maneuvers. We'll get to this in just a second. Combat superiority, basically you have a certain number of superiority dice. Since I am going Fighter 6, what I will end up with here... Let's see what ends up happening with the... Let's see, at 10th level, they become D10s. Okay, so I'll end up having... How many do you end up with? Okay, so I only have 4 D8s. Since you don't get another superiority dice until... don't get another superiority dice until 7th level, so we'll get to that in just a little bit once we get past 10. Now, for my maneuvers, we are going to take a look at what we get. Also, I need to do here... DC... which is 8 plus proficiency bonus plus dex modifier. So we will calculate that here in a little bit once I nail down what my 10th level stats are going to be, since I get a couple stat increases in there. For maneuvers, you start off with 3, and then you learn 2 additional at 7th, 10th, and 15th level. So, what we're going to start with here, there's a lot of maneuvers here. Some of them are good, some of them aren't that great. So what we'd be looking at is we want to start with parry, riposte, and feinting attack. Is, I think, a good place to start. Now, for the rest of the fighter stuff that I would get at 6th level, let's see. I've got my martial archetype. At 4th and 6th, you get ability score improvements. By 5th, you have extra attack. So yeah, I think what would happen is Cromwell would end up going... I think he'd end up going full 6 before he switches over to Rogue. Just so you end up with that extra attack. If you were going to do this this build for your game, and you wanted to do something similar to this, definitely go Fighter 6. Or at least Fighter 5 so you get that second attack before you switch over to Rogue. Because you want to have those 2 attacks. Or in this case, 3 because you are dual wielding. So let's see. Yeah, so as for the fighter, that's what we get at this point. You do get proficiency with an artisan tool of your choice. For Cromwell... Let's see. Oh, hey, Shag. Welcome. Today we are building another character. This is we're actually rebuilding my original character today, Shag. So that's what we are looking at right now. This is a fighter rogue multiclass. So don't worry, I'm not going to throw this at you at some point. So let's go ahead and give him his ability score increases here. So yeah, at 4th level, we are going to... At 4th level, we'll up Constitution. And at 6th level, we will up Dexterity. So this is what we're looking at by the time we get to Rogue. I'll go ahead and calculate those hit points. So for hit dice, we're looking at right now 6d10. So 10 plus your con modifier. At 16, you were looking at, I believe, plus 3. E. Yeah, I believe you're at plus 3 at this point. Let's see. Yeah, 16, 17, you're at plus 3. So here, plus 4, minus 1, plus 3, plus 2, plus 1. So, oh, and for the soldier background, I need to put those skills in too. I always forget about backgrounds, because your background almost never comes up. Soldier background. So he was a scout. Didn't really matter. Where are the... okay, so athletics. And intimidation. Proficient with land vehicles and one type of gaming set. Cards. Land vehicles. And then for his artisan tool, I am going to say cartography, since he is a man of the wilderness. Yeah, it only comes up after 3 hours of arguments. When you need a boat, that's when it comes up. All right, so I'll fill in the scores once we finalize at level 10. Yeah, so this is pretty much the fighter side of things. And here, equipment. Half plate, armor. And I'll skip this. His speed's 30 feet right now. Initiative, +4. So, for multi-classing, if anyone has not multi-classed before, this can be a little bit daunting your first time around. It's really not as complicated as it seems, though. You just have to make sure that you have the right ability scores for it. So, when you multi-class, if you're going to go to Rogue, like I'm doing, you have to have a minimum dexterity of 13. And you gain hit points from your new class, as described for levels after first. And then if you have different hit dice like I would for Fighter and Rogue, you just kind of add those together. So what we'd be looking at, since I'm going for Rogue, what this gives me is 6d10 for D8. There we go. For a total of 10. All right. And then as far as multi-classing goes, you basically just start at first level. You don't gain the full proficiencies for each class. What you do gain when you jump into Rogue is light armor, one skill from the skill list, and thieves' tools. So, thieves' tools. I'll take stealth from the Rogue. And then as far as saving throws go, let's see. I don't know that you actually get saving throws. You might. Let's see. In chat, does anyone know if you get saving throws for your new class or not? I don't know that you do. Yep. Yeah, you don't get any new saving throws. So I don't get to be proficient in dexterity. Yeah. Yeah, because you could take 3 dips and then be proficient in all the saving throws, theoretically. So that makes a ton of sense. So what I end up getting as a rogue to start with is expertise. And that doubles my proficiency bonus. So I will take expertise in stealth, which gives me 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to not be seen. And I'm going to take expertise in wisdom, or perception. So again, that is 10. That's a plus 10. I don't have nature or survival just yet because I'm not a third level rogue just yet. Rogue features. Sneak attack. So, starting out at first level of rogue with the sneak attack. You start with 1d6. And let's see. If you go to the sneak attack column, by the time you get to the 4th level of rogue, you're looking at 2d6. So this will go up to 2d6. Thieves can't. Thieves can't talk, as Muhammad was fond of saying. And cunning action. Which allows you to use a bonus action to dash, disengage, or hide. This is why it's good to have the second attack already, so that you can use this cunning action and instead of your swinging your weapon again for that third attack, you can still take 2 attacks and then disengage or dash. Disengage especially with what we're going to end up doing being a scout rogue. And then at 3rd level, you get your archetype, scout features. So, a scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent, except in the world of D&D, in which case you're a rogue archetype, so you're none of those things. Not to paint all rogues with the same brush, but... there we go. Go ahead, Warlock. Ranger means I passed it. Rogue. All right. So, at 3rd level, you become a scout. Skirmisher. So what Skirmisher lets you do is you can move up to half your speed as a reaction when an enemy ends its turn within 5 feet of you, and it doesn't provoke an attack of opportunity. Survivalist. Survivalist, you gain proficiency with nature and survival. And your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses either of those proficiencies. So basically, you get expertise in nature and survival. Which, again, Rangers don't get any expertise at all. This feature kind of upsets me a little bit as someone who likes the idea of a Ranger, but feels the execution in 5th edition is lacking. As a Scout Rogue, you get better survival than the Ranger. That's wrong. That is, from a flavor standpoint, from a mechanics standpoint, absolutely wrong. I will take advantage of it, but I don't have to like it. So, survival. Wisdom. This ends up being +10. Nature, I've got a +02, so that just ends up being a lowly +8. +8 for a skill that I don't even have the modifier for. Rogues are dumb. Okay, cool. So, that takes care of the initial stuff. And at 4th level, I get another ability score increase. Yeah, Rogue 4, I get another ability score increase. And what I'm going to do here is actually take the slasher feat. Slasher. There we go. I believe that is all that we have to do as far as this stuff here. So what we end up having is a +3 to strength and a +7 to constitution. +8. +3. Yeah, my nature, which I have a 0 intelligence and a 4 dexterity, my nature is equal to my acrobatics check. Dungeons and damn it. +6 for insight. +5 for intimidation. And yeah, those are my ability scores. So, 1 second as I grab my my Dungeon Master's Guide. Cromwell eventually ended up with 2 kind of, not artifact weapons, but 2 very good magic weapons. One of which Shag's character recently picked up in our Dark Sun game. This is very much an Agni and Rudra situation from Devil May Cry 3. In fact, Muhammad told me that he originally intended them to be like Agni and Rudra. The only reason they didn't was that I guessed it. They were originally going to actually be sentient swords that would talk to me. Which is a trope that I love. So, we need to go over to the Fs to find... Here we go. So, Cromwell has... a Flame Tongue and a Frostbrand. I'm just going to call them Fire and Ice. So, a Flame Tongue deals an extra 2d6 fire damage. And basically, you use a bonus action to speak the command word to make it light up. So, attack bonus for this one is going to be 8 plus 8. And since it's a scimitar, it deals 1d6 slashing plus 2d6. All right. Now the Frostbrand. This is what Shag actually picked up. Actually, Austin, you need to check out Gun and Slinger from Nevin Holmes on Kickstarter. It's a 2-player RPG where one player is the gunslinger and the other player is the sentient gun. So if you want to do that, you should check that out. And so with the Frostbrand, what you're looking at is it is a magic sword. Now, yeah, I guess both of these are magic. But they're not plus anything, so you don't get to add anything besides your dex modifier to the damage. So the Frostbrand is also plus 8, 1d6 plus 1d6. And so that's your fire and ice. He also has, I think it ended up being like a plus 2 longbow. So that's going to be a plus 10 for just looking up the longbow here real quick. Yep, 1d8. One d8 plus 6. There we go. All right. So yeah, this is kind of the basic for Cromwell. Ends up being kind of our basic at 10th level, kind of midpoint of our campaign. This is where Cromwell would have ended up. Now, what I would do with Cromwell at this point is I'm going to take him a little bit further with Rogue, just to kind of improve his defense. And then I would switch back to Fighter if I were going to take him all the way to 20. So with that, so let's see if we take him to 5, 6, 7, we'll end up with both. Yeah, if I take him to 7 with Rogue, that would give us... Take him to 7, I can get both evasion and uncanny dodge. Which is good to have. It's good to have both. It's always good to have both. And then I believe I get another archetype feature in there. I also get another expertise in there. So at this point, I guess I could up my acrobatics to make that expertise. And then I could up my... Cromwell ends up taking on kind of a leader position. So I'm going to go ahead and up my... No, actually, I'm going to up my perception. Because Cromwell's not going to end up being a party face. He has a bonus to charisma, but he's not going to end up being the party face. That's not what this character is designed to do. So perception is going to go... Actually, perception might already... Yeah, that's already doubled, so I can't do that again. Sure, intimidation. Intimidation it is. So that's going to go to a +9. And then at this point... Yeah, proficiency's already up. And again, this is not linearly scaling the way that it necessarily would in your game. I'm kind of all over the place because of knowing that this is going to be a 10th level character to start with, which I'm then taking up to 13th. And then from there... I don't think I'll take them all the way to 20th today, but you'll have an idea of what that would look like. There is one... there's one possible incentive to going the rest of the way Scout Rogue that you could do with this. At 13th level as a Scout Rogue... which would kind of be like the top part, like the top, essentially 19th level. You get Ambush Master, which gives you advantage on initiative rolls. And the first creature you hit during the first round of combat becomes easier for you and others to strike. Basically, everyone gets advantage on that person. That's a good feature. That's actually definitely a good feature. It's incentive to try to take this thing all the way. I feel like I get a little bit more utility out of going the rest of the way fighter, though. Just in my opinion. Or not utility, but I get more power. Let's actually do a side-by-side comparison and see where I would end up. Because you could take it either way at this point. I just want to see if I get another ability score increase in here. No. Not until 8th level. So if I do go the rest of the way Rogue, the next level would be an ability score increase. Cleric. I passed Fighter. Here we go. So yeah, 6th level fighter. So, I mean, moving forward, you get Indomitable at 9th level as a fighter. At 7th level, you get Know Your Enemy. Your combat superiority dice go up at 10th, 18th. Yeah, 10th and 18th level. You get Relentless at 15th level. I don't remember if you get a second fighting style. That might be a champion thing. Yeah, champions get 2 fighting styles. Yeah, so that's a good point. You could only get up to 14 in Rogue, and you'd only be able to get and you'd be able to get 3 attacks with Fighter. Those are both excellent points, because you do get an additional attack at 11th, and you would get a 4th at 20th, but you don't, not with this build. So yeah, you go back to Fighter. So if you go up to Fighter 7 at 14th level, 7th level for fighters, let's see. At that point, you get Know Your Enemy. And then as far as combat superiority, I get 2 more maneuvers at this point. So for those, what we'd be looking at here... we could do Menacing Attack, Trip Attack. There's a couple others. Evasive Footwork isn't too bad. Disarming Attack isn't bad. Commander Strike lets me set up someone else for Sneak Attack, pretty much. Like, if there's another rogue in the party, I could do that. So if we're looking at 2 more maneuvers here, I think what ends up being best for right now, we could do Menacing Attack and Trip Attack. So let me go ahead and stick that in. Menacing Attack. Trip Attack. And then superiority dice go up to 5 at 7th level. And from there, I guess now we can calculate what my DC would be. Let's see, at 14, does our proficiency bonus go up again? Yeah, so at 14th level, you're all the way up to +5 now. So the DC at this point for saves would be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus dexterity, so 17. This is a DC 17 to save against some of these, which is not bad. It's actually pretty good. Then at 8th level, if I go Fighter 8, let me make sure this is correct. Bump this up to 8. 15. Fighter 8. At this point, it's an ability score improvement. Take dexterity to 20. Which makes this a 15. Attacks are now +10. And +12 respectively. This goes up to 15. And then from there, yeah, we're at 15th level. Take it up to... Let's see. At 9th, you get Indomitable. At 10th, that's when you get another feature. So yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll go up to Fighter 10. Just so we can get those extra superiority dice, or those better superiority dice. Indomitable. And let's see. For extra attack, get the next one at 11. Shag, don't burn that ramen broth. Cool. And let's see if that martial archetype changes anything else. Let's see. There's a D10s. I don't get an extra superiority dice until 15th. So I might stay at 5. I might go up to 6. I think if you go to 20, you go up to 6 with this build. So Shag succeeded on his saving throw for the broth, his broth saving throw. Although, knowing what I know about you, Shag, you probably have a good bonus to your broth saving throw. So it seems like you've been doing that for a while. So yeah, at this point, you've got a... at this point, you have a 17th level fighter rogue multiclass. Pretty good... You have advantage. Yes. Absolutely. So yeah, at this point, you know, you're an epic level character, essentially. You can take it all the way to 20, the next 3... But you've got yourself a pretty good dex fighter here, with a lot of utility for skills, a great bonus to tracking, great combat features. You don't have any spells or anything like that, but you really don't need them. You've got good bonus to attack, a good armor class here, good bonus to initiative, good saving throws, and your hit points, you're not exactly a glass cannon at this point. I never did calculate the hit points, but for a fighter, I go ahead, add this up. I don't necessarily have to do this linearly because hit point bonuses stack, so we'll start with the fighter stuff and then go to the rogue stuff for our total hit points here. So I would start out with 13. So yeah, basically 13... plus 9 for second level. This is taking averages. 9 for third level. For fourth, fifth, sixth. 10th. And then for the rogue side of things, Yeah, I mean, you basically have 171 hit points at this point. You're good to go. Basically, you have good hit points, good AC, good attacks. You're maneuverable. Your damage output is not as much as it might be if you have, say, a long sword and you're able to do a D8 or a D10 damage. You could have higher AC if you go full fighter. But with the added superiority dice and sneak attack, the extra 2d6 once per turn, you're basically okay as far as the damage output goes. You scale well with everyone else. So all in all, if you're looking to do kind of a rangery type character who's a little bit heavier on the combat side of things, you really can't go wrong with this build. It's pretty good. This gives you the flavor of a ranger with the combat output of a fighter and some of the skill monkeyness of a rogue, because you get those expertise. So yeah, if you're looking to do a skirmisher, I definitely recommend going Battlemaster and Scout. Yeah, and if, as Austin says, if you want to go the archer route, you can definitely swap out Battlemaster for Arcane Archer. You could even stick with Battlemaster and be a bow fighter and still do pretty good. But yeah, this is your... I hate to say it, it involves no ranger, but this is your good ranger build. This is basically, kind of the best ranger that you can build in the game. I will say, though, if you have a campaign that involves any kind of Underdark, or if you want to be a little bit more roguey and a little bit less fightery, if you multi-class rogue with Gloomstalker Ranger, that's a pretty good character. You can do a lot there. You get dark vision. You become invisible to dark vision at a certain point. You can get an extra attack if you go high enough in Ranger. But yeah, Gloomstalker Ranger, A+. It is it's a really, really good multi-class, though. And if I had Xanathar's Guide back in the day, and I knew a little bit more about D&D characters like I know now, this is probably what Cromwell would have looked like. And by 20th level, he would have been dealing out some punishment. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. These always end up going a couple hours over because I like to get into roleplay stuff. But yeah, I really enjoy doing these character creations. If anyone wants to challenge me to build something, at some point I will do a 3d6 in order build. So yeah, I'll definitely try that out. And I'll roll them live so that you guys can see my reactions. I won't use a dice roller, I'll use actual dice. But I won't lie to you, I promise. So, letting you guys know what's coming up here for the next week. On Monday on Rollin' Bones, we are going to have the people behind Hope Punk Press on to talk about spaceships and Star Worms. For anyone who loves 5th edition but also wants to play a space game, this is going to be the conversation for you. Austin's actually currently playing in a Spaceships and Star Worms campaign as a sentient cactus man. So, yeah, you can do that. There's lots of cool stuff. Lots of stuff to discuss there. Next Saturday, I will be out of town, so we will not do Danishes and Dragons, and we might not have a Rollin' Bones on September the 21st because I'll be coming home that day. We might be able to pull something together. We might not. I don't know. I don't have a guest booked for then. Your Droner account got banned. Yeah, there's a space Twitter. There's a space Twitter in that game. We'll talk a little bit about that in the interview. But yeah, that's what's coming up. We're definitely going to do Danishes and Dragons on the 25th. I might just take the 21st off because I'll be traveling home that day. I'll be very tired. But yeah, we'll be back with definitely rolling bones on the 14th to discuss spaceships and Star Worms. So until then, guys, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and I'll see you next time.